welcome back to the Beauty Lab podcast. This is episode
10
already. Yay! Thanks for coming back, and for those of you who are brand new, thank you for tuning in today. So today I'm going to be talking to Velia about a situation a lot of women in our age category, and also younger, I'm finding, and that is the question about coloring your hair or going gray. So I know many of us are coloring our hair almost every 3 to 6 to 8 weeks. And maybe some of us are starting to get tired of doing that. So tell us a little bit about that. When do we know it's time, or is there a good time to stop coloring the hair and embrace the gray?
Yes. Welcome to the Beauty Lab podcast, your drive time resource for all things beauty, health, and wellness. We're your hosts and favorite beauty nerds, Monina and Velia.
Join us as we debunk myths, explore the latest trends, and dive deep into the science behind your favorite products. We'll interview industry experts and answer your burning beauty questions in 30 minutes or less.
So I think that the best thing to do is make a pros and cons list. So obviously on the pros and cons list, the pros are going to be in regards to stopping your root touch-ups. Like, we're done coloring gray. Am I ready? This is how we know. Pros, it'll save you time going to the salon, right? Takes a lot of time every 3 to 4 weeks or whatever you do. Normally, that's normally how often I see people for gray root touch-ups.
3 to 4 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks, yeah. It'll save you money because obviously every 3 to 4 weeks, you're budgeting maybe a couple $100s to get your roots touched up. And then it'll also improve the overall health of your hair when you don't have to color it all the time. Even though covering gray is probably the least offensive thing you can do as far as hair color to harm your hair, it's still better to not color your hair at all. Versus putting any kind of chemical on your hair. But the big fat con that always just chews up and swallows all the pros is that no matter how beautiful the gray that is growing out of your head looks, it will always age you to go gray. Yeah. Which is why so many people do it forever. They're like, I'm not ready. I have 90-year-old clients that are like, I'm not ready to look old.
Yeah, actually my mom just turned 81, and yeah, she's still coloring her hair.
Yeah.
And I've been coloring my hair forever too, and I just can't seem to get over that, looking in the mirror and seeing the gray and going, it makes me look old.
Yeah. Right? Well, it's true, and it will. It will. I mean, no judgment. If you're somebody who wants to go gray, awesome. I'm totally here for it. I've transitioned so many of my clients into growing out their gray, and it is quite a process.
Okay, so then the next question I have for you is, could you walk us through that process? Let's say someone's finally made that decision. Yeah. I'm gonna go gray. I'm gonna embrace the gray. What does the process look like?
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of break it down into a few different scenarios because everybody's gray situation is so different than the next person. But generally speaking, the goal is to balance the ratio of the gray or white. When I say gray, I'm gonna mean gray or white. Okay. I mean, sometimes we have pure white, and then sometimes we have more of an actual light gray color. When I say gray, I mean both. So just for simplification purposes. So to balance the ratio of the gray to white to the pigmented hair, which is the hair that's still your natural color, right? And then to balance and remove all of the warm tones. So that's the goal, to make, to help transition you from this, half an inch of root that's growing out of your head to the rest of your hair. Okay, so now there's a few different ways you can do it, and I'll go from the most cost effective way of doing it to we'll go incrementally more and more expensive, but just letting you know this particular number one is the only free way of doing it.
Okay.
And that is it's going to work best if you have like 10 to 20% gray. Now, most people think...
What do you mean 10 to 20% gray?
So how much gray is growing out of your head compared to how much natural color you still have left. So if you have 10% gray, that means like, let's say you have like 100,000 hairs on your head. That means 10% of those 100,000 are gray hairs and 90% are still your natural color. So most people think like when they look at their gray growing out, everyone thinks they have way more gray than they actually do. They're like, I'm at least 50% gray. What are you talking about? I'm like, no, you're like 4% gray. But it's hard to see it. It's hard to watch it like accumulate like more and more. So for this particular scenario, I'd say this is going to work best if you're like 10 to 20% gray. So hopefully that explanation makes sense and people can kind of go, oh, that's me. Just let it grow. And eventually you'll cut off all of the hair that's been colored and it'll all just kind of balance out. So that means that for a while, yes, you're going to have, your root growing out and it's going to be like gray, like kind of going down and down and down. And then of course, like if you really are like brave or like wanting to like shorten that process, you can go get like a good amount of hair cut off. Okay. So there's less time where you have to suffer through two different things going on in your head. The reason I say this is good or best for 10 to 20% is because 10 to 20% isn't really that much. It's going, when it's on your head, you're going to notice it, but other people are probably going to think you just started going gray, right? Because they probably don't even realize like you color your hair. Now that there's always exceptions to that. Like if you've been lightening your hair and covering gray at the same time and you're naturally dark, like I'm not going to go into every scenario because it'll twist your brain.
For clarification, because I'm envisioning in my head. So when you said 10 to 20% of your head is graying,
correct,
turning white, you mean how many hairs are actually affected, not how long the gray is on each individual strand.
Yes, what you said. How many strands are growing out gray? Okay. Because once they start growing out gray, they're
always going to grow out gray.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So 10 to 20%.
10 to 20% gray. And most people who've been coloring their hair for a long time have probably had this conversation with their stylist, like, how much gray do I have? Like, I must be 50% gray. I must be 100% gray. Everyone thinks they're 100% gray. And I've never met one person in my life that was 100% gray. I mean, there's always some gray. Maybe like 90% is like the highest amount of gray that I've ever really seen. And also just every single scenario could apply to any amount of gray. I'm just kind of giving you like the ideal, like for the least amount of pain and suffering as you're doing this. So the second option would be like for people who have like 20 to 50% gray, doing a combination of highlights and lowlights. Usually like way more highlights, because usually if you're covering gray, you're going darker. And again, to balance what's growing out of your head versus what you've been coloring and what you have on the majority of your hair, you want to add those highlights. But those highlights, it's going to be a lot of highlights, like a super heavy highlight. And then the goal would be to get those highlights like as white as possible, which can be very difficult depending on how long your hair is, how thick your hair is, the texture of your hair, and how long you've been coloring it for.
And are you putting the highlights on the hair that hasn't turned gray yet?
Yes. So in this kind of scenario, when you're growing your gray out, we're going to assume that you're done touching up the root. Like today you come into the salon and you're like, I'm done touching up my roots, don't put any more color in my roots. And how do we blend this and balance this so as my natural gray is growing out, I don't look like I have two things going on,
So because you're creating that cohesiveness around the head, as the gray is coming in, whatever still has the natural color, you're highlighting to kind of create that balance throughout the head.
Actually, it's whatever, like, I'm trying not to like use so many visuals because I know a lot of people only listen.
Right.
But basically the hair that's like let's assume like your hair is like a solid brown. Let's just throw a scenario out there.
Okay.
You have 50% gray, but you've been coloring your hair like a solid brown.
Okay.
Okay, so now you're ready, and now you really see that regrowth,
Right.
right? Because every 3 weeks or even less, you start noticing your gray roots coming out. So what you want to do is you want to put through the hair that's been colored, you want to make it match what's growing out. So in order to do that, you have to significantly lighten that hair, because what's growing out of your head is much lighter.
It's brown,
right?
And you're lightening it.
Exactly. So so you're highlighting the hair that's already been colored. So the majority of the hair that's on your head, so it matches the root that's growing out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and what I was saying was that you want that color that you lighten it to be as white as possible.
Okay.
And that can be a challenge, because that's a challenge on virgin hair, like hair that's never been colored, to get it like that really white blonde, which is why this is such a challenging situation that people don't even want to deal with, right?
Because you're also dealing with their skin tone and making sure if it's warm or cool, or that, because the white can be an array. It's such a large range of what white could look like.
It's true, and you're never ever going to match with hair color the color that's growing out of your head naturally, the gray or white that's growing out of your hair. You can only do your best to get it as close as possible. Well, the white hair that's growing out is literally unpigmented hair, has no pigment. So when you're dealing with like your natural hair that already has natural pigment, and then we've been putting color, more pigment, artificial pigment on top of that, now you're trying to blow all of that out and get it as white as possible, which best case scenario, you can get it to like a super pale blonde, but then you have to tone it. You have to add the ashy gray sort of tones back in, because now you have something that it doesn't get any cooler than gray, right? You don't have, and you need to get rid of all of the warmth on the rest of your hair. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, with trying to keep it, like maintain it, is maintaining that ashy tone. So in this scenario, you'll still have to come back in probably a few times. Like this, depending on your hair, you're gonna have probably 3 sessions, three to 5, it depends on your hair, of highlights, heavy highlights, to lighten enough pieces.
So what's the time frame here then we're looking at if you're coming back at least 3 times? What's that timing?
That is going to actually depend on each person, and that is a great question for the stylist who's doing it. But you know, if you go on TikTok or if you go on Instagram, you see these like gray transformations, and those look like they took 2 hours, but they probably took 12 hours with 3 assistants. And it's not cheap. Like at the end of a 12-hour day, you're looking at least $1,500. And like, that's a lot of money, you know, especially when your mindset is on saving money, right? So if you break it up into 3 or 4 sessions, that can be kind of however much you can tolerate. Like, and then even after that, you're gonna wanna come back in and get the toner's always gonna fade to like a yellowy sort of color, hopefully a very pale yellow. But you're gonna have to come back and get it retoned, because until that hair that has been colored is cut off, that hair is gonna have to continuously be toned. And that's probably like every 3 to 4 weeks. Which still, if you think about it, like no matter how you kind of try to sugarcoat it, this is gonna be a process, probably gonna take about a year to kind of get to where you want to be and get all the old colored hair cut off. Your hair grows about 6 inches a year. So if you think about the last 6 inches of your hair, I mean, depends, like it would take you a lot longer, you know, if you didn't want to cut your hair. So that's the second. So
it sounds like it's definitely a commitment for a year.
Totally a commitment.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a process, and it is not going to be, it's an investment in the future to not have to pay for these retouch-ups, you know, indefinitely. But in the beginning, it's going to be an upfront cost until that hair is cut off. I mean, you could totally just let it grow a few inches and get a really short, cute pixie cut, and that pretty much solves that problem.
And I have seen women do that, where they had, their hair was about ear length, that they didn't want to wait that long.
Yeah.
And they literally cut it all off.
Yeah.
And it makes the process a lot shorter.
Of course. Yeah. So then the third scenario, 80 to 100% gray is going to have to be, of course, depending on what you've been doing, lightening like your whole head. So like an all over bleach, and you're probably going to have to do that several times to get all of that color pigment out. Expect a significant haircut that day if this is you.
Because you're literally bleaching any pigment that's still left in the hair is basically what you're saying you're doing. Okay, got it.
Not on the regrowth, not on the new hair necessarily, because that doesn't even have pigment.
Right.
But on all of the colored hair.
Right, the rest of the hair that still has some pigment.
Yeah.
Natural pigment.
Yes.
Wow.
Artificial or natural pigment.
Artificial or natural.
Again, like I said, you're going to want to get a good haircut that day because bleaching it several times is really, some people won't even be able to do that because their hair won't tolerate it.
Because their hair's too brittle.
Exactly. And then again, that's the same kind of maintenance with like the ashy toner. So every 3 to 4 weeks, hopefully, come in for a toner. And then at home, you can probably use like a purple shampoo or something to kind of maintain it at home, which only works on really, 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 really blonde hair. And then the fourth option, which is like the no bleach route, okay, is using a demi-permanent color instead of a permanent color on your root. So like basically continuing the root touch-up process, but instead of using a permanent color that covers all of the gray and never fades off of it, a demi-permanent will temporarily cover / blend depending on how much gray you have, and it will grow out, and as it grows out it will fade out. So it usually lasts about 4 weeks, so you'd still be coming in like every 4 to 6 weeks to get your root touch up, but this time when you're coming in you're getting a demi, and the demi will sort of hold you over. It'll be a more translucent coverage, so it won't be the same. But you can continue doing that till you get to a point where you have either enough hair grown out to cut off, and then you just stop and you just continue to let the whatever demi is left fade out, and there you go.
Okay, that's kind of the last option.
That's kind of the last option that we have.
But it sounds like you should definitely talk to your stylist.
Oh yeah,
obviously, and then talk to someone. Would you say that some stylists are better at gauging and helping someone with this process?
Definitely.
Or are all cosmetologists trained to do this?
No. This is not something that you even learn how to do in cosmetology school. This is going to be like, talk to your stylist. And sometimes, I hear this a lot from clients too. Like, I wanted to do this, but my stylist like refused.
Oh, okay.
Which I understand. I understand being a stylist. Yeah. I understand why a stylist would refuse, or at least, that's your interpretation of what happened. Right. But it could be they refuse because they're like, no, we tried this before, and then you begged me to like do it again, and then it was this big process, and
right. Which is why you want to talk to your stylist, because they may have a reason why
exactly.
they may not want to, because they may think, well, at the end of the day, you're probably not going to be happy about the result.
Exactly. And most people, I would say like more than half of my gray coverage clients who'd wanted to let their gray grow out decided that was totally not for them. But it's not like after a year. It's usually after like 3 months. They're like, I can't stand it anymore. And then you start out. I mean, it's very easy. Like, it doesn't hurt your hair to like put permanent color back on. But no, to answer your question about like, is this what every stylist, do they know how to do this? Not really. Okay. Like, not. It's kind of a specialty sort of thing.
Okay, so it is a specialty.
Yeah, and I would, of course, start by talking to your stylist about it.
Right.
And if they're like, yeah, I don't even want to do that, because that's a thing that you might hear, then you can look for like, another stylist, or maybe they can recommend somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have, this is part of the show where we go to a question from our listener, but I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
For me personally.
Yeah.
So in the past, I've never really talked about going gray, just because every time I see myself with gray in the mirror, to me, the gray that's growing out, because I've seen women with like the silver hair, or the really pretty white hair, but it sounds to me now that's something that their stylist is helping them with. It doesn't just grow perfectly white or like that pretty color?
Actually, it could. It could
could?
totally, yeah. Like I have clients who have like beautiful, like natural white that just grows right out of, like right around their hair. Like it's like ideal, you know? And I don't have to do anything to it.
But that's not everyone.
No.
Okay.
No.
Because when I look in the mirror and I've actually tried to see what it would look like for me, and tell me if I'm doing something wrong or something I can prevent from happening, but it looks to me like my gray looks kind of yellowish as it's growing out. And I'm like, why would I want yellow hair to grow out, you know? I'm almost jealous of the women with the pretty white hair that grows out.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but your hair is very pretty white. You do have very pretty white.
I do.
I've never seen yellow, but I know what you're talking about because I have seen it on other people. I've never seen it on you is what I meant to say. Usually yellow, like if your white, natural white hair is turning like a yellowy color, it's either from like hard mineral deposits from like your water, or it's from smoking or like environmental things. Reasons, yeah. It's not really the color that's actually growing out. It's something that's depositing on, because when the gray grows out, it has no pigment. So it's not going to grow out yellow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can turn yellow over time though.
It can turn yellow over time because of the environment and things that are landing on.
Exactly. And it's like a dingy kind of yellow.
It looks kind of dingy yellow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what you would do in that scenario is you would use like a color depositing shampoo, like a purple shampoo could work, or there's even like gray shampoos that you can use for something like that.
All right, well, good to know. So if you guys think you have yellow hair, you don't. So thanks for clearing that up.
Also, if you've grown out your gray, like we want to hear from you. Like, what was that process like? What did you learn from that process? What advice could you give somebody else who's like thinking of doing it, aside from like, don't do it? Because there are people who are really like dedicated to the process, and it does take a while, but it can look really good.
Okay, and I know I'm throwing a bunch of stuff at you here, but remember a few years ago, like young girls.
Oh God!
We're literally doing the gray.
Yeah,
but it was kind of like a purpley, like silvery gray, and I was like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah,
you're like in your 20s. Like, was that a trend that you saw?
Totally.
Okay.
Totally a trend that I saw. Like, and doesn't look good on everybody, for sure. Like, if you're somebody who looks good with very cool toned clothing, or if you like look good in silver, then you kind of know that like you would possibly be a candidate for like having gray hair. But it's such it was probably my least favorite thing to do, or even like, because in order to get the hair to be that gray color, you have to bleach it white.
Yeah, I mean, you just told us the whole process, and now you're doing this on like a young girl's hair.
Exactly, and it's always the girls who have super dark hair that want this. And what they don't realize is that you're not just gonna dig through your color, like, supply and pull out a box of gray hair color and put it on. Like, that doesn't exist.
Right.
You actually have to remove all the pigment and then tone it. And that was more of like you said, like a purpley gray, more of like a semi-permanent color, which some people know what that is, some people don't, but they don't last long at all. So what would happen is you'd get them to like this pale yellow or white, and then you would put this gray toner on. The process of lifting them even that light really significantly messes with their hair, and the gray toner can be patchy, and it can do all kinds of crazy things. It's very unpredictable. Those semi-permanent colors that are like the blues and the reds and the like Crayola red, those can be very unpredictable, and it's hard to gauge, and the gray is the most unpredictable, I feel.
Yeah, and I'm not knocking. I know it was a trend.
Yeah.
Just for me, I'm like, when I look at a young girl with all this beautiful pigment in her hair, to me it seems counterproductive because we're trying so hard to keep that youthful look with our own natural hair color, and to like completely strip it and bleach it and do all those processes. To me, it's just more like from a health standpoint
Yeah.
of the hair. I guess I didn't agree with that, but I'm not knocking the
No,
trend.
no,
It
of
did
course.
look beautiful on some of these.
Well, yeah,
some of
from an
these girls.
artistic standpoint,
Right.
it's freaking cool.
Yeah.
Like, it is really cool looking.
Right.
It lasts 4.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you're like back
The
at
payoff is
yes,
not
it
that
isn't worth
long.
it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. Just like another color, sort of like that was like rose gold. It's like you got this gorgeous,
Yes.
gorgeous rose gold. You wash your hair twice, it's gone.
And it's gone.
Yeah, it just isn't. The pigment load is just not there, especially when you're putting it on top of hair that's been lightened
Right.
to oblivion.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just really considering all the different steps that your hair has to go through and seeing if this
Yeah.
is a process that it's worth doing for you and the commitment.
Yes.
It is a commitment. Sounds like to go all gray. But yeah. All right.
Going all gray will be a totally worth it investment
Yes.
in a year.
In a year.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
It's not a one and done.
No, it's not. It's never a
process.
one and done. And the really honest stylists whose feed are full of transitioning people into gray, they will be very honest about like, hey, by the way, this looks like it only took 30 minutes, but it took 12 hours, and this is not the end for this person. This isn't like have fun now. This is like
Step
no,
one.
see you in 4 weeks for your
Right.
toner.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ongoing process.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, now let's go on to a question from our listener.
Yes.
Today, our question is from Lisa from Santa Clara.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa, for your
Lisa.
question. And the question is apple cider vinegar really good for your hair? I have heard this.
Yeah.
Please, I want to hear this. I don't know.
So, apple cider vinegar can definitely have some benefits. So, if you listened to episode 6 about sulfates, I talk about the pH scale.
Right.
And I kind of break down where things go on the pH scale. Apple cider vinegar has a pH of 2 to 3.
Oh.
So, if you're looking to close your cuticle and seal your cuticle and that helps the health of your hair frizz and adds shine and things like that. Apple cider vinegar is a pH of 2 to 3, so it will definitely close the cuticle and all of that. Unfiltered apple cider vinegar has, the mother that's like in kombucha,
Yeah.
and so that has like tons of probiotics, and if you put it on your scalp, like that can actually
Irritate?
help.
Oh,
No, it will irritate if you don't dilute it,
Oh.
but it will actually help like reduce fungal growth and things like that. Here's the cons.
Okay.
You smell like vinegar. You're gonna be applying this in the shower, most likely.
Yeah,
Can you even imagine?
Yeah, well,
Can you
what's
even
the,
imagine?
what's the process? Like, are you literally putting the apple
You're
cider
diluting
vinegar?
the apple cider vinegar with water.
Okay.
And don't ask me for the ratios. I don't know.
Okay.
I actually don't
Okay,
know.
so you do dilute it with water.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you dilute it with water, and then you either spray it or pour it on your hair, on your scalp, in the shower. Now, can you just imagine that scenario with the steam and the vinegar? It's like a vinegar bomb went off in the shower, and it stinks.
And it'll probably smell like that.
Yeah,
For a
you're gonna
while.
smell like vinegar.
Okay.
While there are some kind of benefits to it, potential benefits to it, I don't recommend it.
No.
I don't know.
Because there's other options
Yeah.
that are better.
Yeah.
And you don't deal with the
It's
smell.
not gonna hurt you. You want to try it at home?
Yeah.
Try it.
Try it.
Whoever is obsessed lives and breathes by the apple cider vinegar, praises the apple cider vinegar gods at home. I want to hear from you. I want to know
Yeah.
what you're doing, how you're doing it.
Or if you're like, it doesn't smell, like, tell
Yeah.
us what your recipe
Yeah,
is.
if you're like, Velia, stop being dramatic. It doesn't smell like vinegar later.
Yeah, because we love hearing from you guys, because if somebody else has come up with a different option, maybe, we want to hear about it so we can share it. So
I did try it once
Did you?
in the shower, and I like choked to death. Yeah. I regret. I was like, oh no, I got this out.
Oh, well, hey.
It's apple cider vinegar. What do you expect?
It's
It's strong anyway.
It's going to be strong.
You should just drink it.
Which is good
Yeah,
for you.
it's very good for you.
Okay. Well, today we actually are also going to do a product review.
Yeah.
We will do that occasionally. And today, Velia has something that I'm really interested in because I had no idea all the benefits. So Velia, take it away.
Yeah, so this is a terry cloth lined waterproof shower cap, and everybody should own one of these. So the number one killer of your style, your hairstyle, is humidity. And we've talked in previous episodes about washing your hair and how often to wash it and how to maintain it and stuff. And this is the best way to also prolong your being able to go in between shampoos, because the more humidity that reaches your scalp, the more dirty your hair is going to look and feel. So put your hair up loosely, put this over your head, obviously, cover your hair, cover your ears, just because it's kind of hard to like not get your hairline if your ears aren't covered. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend like putting your head underneath the water and letting it beat on the top, but whatever splashes off of your body and gets you, this is going to protect your hair and it's going to prolong your style. As soon as you take this off, you're going to be like, oh my God, my hair doesn't even look like I took a shower.
Okay.
Versus just putting your hair up in like a clip or something, and then when you get out of the shower, the bottom of your hair is wet, probably some of the ends are wet, like your whole hairline is wet,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh, now I have to blow dry it again. You don't have to blow dry it again if you use this. You don't have to do literally, like there are days where I do absolutely nothing to my hair.
So that's news to me. I don't know if you guys know that, but the whole fact of the humidity
Yeah.
getting into the hair is what ruins the style.
And specifically the terry cloth lined.
Okay.
Because any humidity that kind of goes underneath the shower cap
Right.
is going to get absorbed by the terry cloth and not your hair. So that's why the terry cloth lined is so much better than just like a regular like
so it's
shower
important
cap.
to have the shower cap with the terry
Yes,
cloth.
this is the magic sauce right here,
Got
the
it.
terry cloth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
I'll link this. We don't get sponsored for any of the things that we review yet.
Yeah.
But,
but it's stuff that we have tried
Yeah.
and we like, so that's why we bring it on here. And
yeah, and I got this for like $10 on Amazon. So I will link in the show notes this particular one, and there's like a bunch of color options you can choose from.
Great, thank you. That was a great product review. So if any of you have found any value in anything we talked about today, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Monina Wright.
And I'm Velia.
Until next time,
Keep experimenting with your beauty routine.